Okay Reddit, what are your true stories that nobody will ever believe? Home alone completely, no pets, no one has a key to the house but me. I bake a pizza and walk away to let it cool. Come back, no freaking pizza. I'd show proof but it would just be a picture of my empty countertop. Me and my dad drove our rental car in neutral with no gas from the top of the volcano in Maui into a gas station in Kahului, hitting every single green light there was and never having to stop once. LOL, I've heard of people doing this who aren't out of gas just to save $, or for fun. I was riding my bike, hit a curb, flipped over my handlebars, and landed on my feet. It was early in the morning, so no one was around to see it. I guess my story isn't so special. Oh well, I guess it's worth mentioning my comical injury. My bike has stem shifters, and in the process of flipping over the handlebars, my pubic area hit the shifters, resulting in a bruised swollen labia. It was funny to tell friends about, but it freaking hurt. At school, years ago, I drop-kicked a thick-cut chip french fry into the air and thought nothing of it. Seconds later a scream and applause erupted from about 15 yards away as the chip had flew through the air and landed inside someone's Coke bottle whilst they were walking with it. Very few people believe my story about the drunk guy in a McDonald's parking lot, but I'll tell it anyways. My friends and I went to McDonald's around closing time to get some late night food. The restaurant was already closed, but the drive-thru was still open. When we got there was a drunk, possibly mentally troubled, man pulling on the doors, trying to get in. We told him the restaurant part was closed, but that we could get him some food from the drive-thru if he gave us money. He gave us a few dollars and ordered a large fries. We returned with his food. After we gave it to him, he yelled that they were too salted, pulled out his dong, and began trying to bat fries at our car with it. He batted fries at our car with his freaking dong. We sped away into the night, forever changed by the incident. I believe you only because that story is hilarious. True fish story. I was amateur fishing with my dad on Edgertown Dock on Martha's Vineyard. I notice that I have a fish hook, so I start to reel it in. Suddenly a freaking cormorant, swimming bird, swims up and snags that little bee. So now I'm in a freaking tug-of-war over a fish's life with a goddamn bird. And I was like 11 at the time. I won the tug-of-war, then tossed the fish back into the gaping jaws of the bird. I am gracious in my victories. Should have deep fried that bird along with the fish. My girlfriend and I were exiting a movie one summer night and I saw a black guy in some fantastic freaking attire with the little white girl who was dressed a little less. So, while we're walking by, this guy's hat blows off his head and he just turns around and ignores it. I chase after the hat for the heck of it, I guess. I bring the hat back to him and say, "Here you go, man." He takes the hat and thanks me, and going into a handshake he says, "Buy your girl something nice," and puts something in my hand. I walk away kind of freaked out and look at the paper in my hand. Freaking $100 bill. I know that dude was a total freaking pimp. TLDR. Caught a pimp's hat in the wind. Got $100. Someone should write a song. Pimp's hat in the wind. Not me, but my dad says this happened to him just under a month ago. He was in a nature trail park walking my dog while visiting some friends. This is in the city, so there are houses surrounding the park, but inside of it it's just like being in a forest. Anyway, my dog is just playing in a nearby creek when my dad hears some bizarre squawking like noise, followed by rustling, then silence, then more thrashing and squawking. This continues for a few minutes before he starts to hear a rhythmic thumping. The rustling continues. My dad, now frozen with curiosity, hears this thumping growing louder until an eagle swoops out of a nearby tree with a woodpecker latched onto its back, pecking the eagle's head. The pair flew past him and into some trees and out of sight. The best explanation he can think of is this woodpecker landed on the eagle's back thinking it was a tree, and freaked the frick out when it realized it wasn't. I guess the fact that I believe him means I don't have any reason to be in this thread, but I know you're all just here to read crazy stories. This story is impeccable. When I was about 8, I had to fly across country alone. So my dad thought it would be best to pay a little bit extra for a first class ticket so the stewardesses would be sure to look after me. My dad escorted me on the plane to my seat and asked the man who happened to be sitting next to me to do him a favor and make sure I was okay. The guy turned out to be hilarious. During the flight he repeatedly flirted with the stewardesses, ordered drinks, and cracked jokes. Right before we landed he ordered a full bottle of champagne and told me to hide it in my backpack and give to my mom as a gift when she picked me up. Later, when I told my dad about the flight, he informed me that the guy I was sitting next to was none other than John Belushi. At the time I didn't know who he was, but a year or two later when I next saw him again on Saturday Night Live I recognized him immediately. Amazing. Once when I was about 15 I was walking down the street drinking a Slurpee with two buddies. I was holding it at my side in my right hand. My one friend dropped back, came up behind me, and kicked the Slurpee as hard as he could out of my hand. It flew up in the air spinning like crazy. Seriously must have gone 20 feet high. As it came down he caught it perfectly and started drinking it. The straw stayed in, lid stayed on and not a drop of Slurpee was lost. So I'm out on a date downtown and was having dinner at a place that had little mini Grey Poupon bottles on the table. I couldn't tell you why, aside from a few beers, but for some reason, I decided to pocket the Grey Poupon bottle and then promptly forgot about it until we're walking down the city street and there are cars parked at the curb, one of which has a guy hanging out the driver's side, hollering at passing girls. So my date and I walk by and he regards us as we pass, thinking for a minute, and then blurts out, "Pardon me, do you have any Grey Poupon?" At which point I reached into my pocket, walked over to him, said, "But of course," and handed him the bottle of Grey Poupon. Only my date and that guy, and another friend of mine, can verify that it actually happened. It's honestly a bit too weak of an anecdote to just make up, only a lucky coincidence. Somewhere else on the internet, that dude is telling this story from his perspective in a thread just like this one. Sometime around 2002 or 2003 I went out camping with a dozen or so friends who were in the restaurant business. We went in the middle of the week as that's the only time they could get off, so the campground we were at in Manitoba was completely empty except for us. We were partying pretty hard, lots of booze and weed was consumed, and we decided to walk down to the beach as that's what one does in the middle of the night while camping. When we got to the lake, the sky above was absolutely lit up with the northern lights. If you've ever seen proper northern lights, you'll know how fast those tendrils of light can whip around the sky. This was an absolutely mind-blowing experience, so we all decided to lie down on the beach and stare up at the show. This went on for maybe 10 or 20 minutes, with much oohing and ahhing by everyone there. Suddenly, the northern lights stopped, and by stopped, I mean all the tendrils laced across the sky stopped moving, and more surprisingly, they all arced towards a ring in the middle, directly above us. This wasn't just something I witnessed. Everyone was asking, "Are you seeing this? Is this happening?" It was so unnatural and so bizarre as all the waves were pointed at a spot directly above us, radiating out towards the edges of the sky. This lasted for a good 5 or 10 minutes, and then they faded away. Everyone there witnessed it, and it made everyone else super uncomfortable. To this day when I mention it, everyone else sorta laughs nervously and says we must have smoked too much weed that day, and move on from the subject. I don't know what caused the phenomenon, but it was the single strangest event I've witnessed in my life. During a LAN party where I had to install Half-Life, randomly typed something with a general format of the HL1 CD key because I didn't feel like getting my manual installed flawlessly. Somewhere out there's a guy with that CD key that got screwed out of Half-Life. This isn't about me, but it's about my dad. He was a local police officer for 32 years, eventually retiring as a lieutenant. My family has lived in Silicon Valley since before I was born, and my folks still live there. A few years after transferring to his retiring police department, my dad is working graveyard. At the time he was a beat cop just killing time in the wee hours of the morning. That is, until he gets a call about a break-in at an office building. When he gets there, he finds the door open. Don't know if it was smashed and lock-picked undamaged. He's the first responder, so he peeks his head inside. There are cubicles, computers, desks, chairs, tables, everything set up to look like your standard Innertech style high-tech office, except that it's a ghost town. Everything is covered in a fine layer of dust. Everything looks like it hasn't been touched in years, if not longer. My dad looks from the door in and sees footprints that cross through the office and deep into the building. They end at a large safe at the back of the building, which is now open. My dad exits the building as a few more officers show up. A few minutes later, a lady in a very nice business suit, keep in mind, this is at like 3 AM, with a radio walks up to my dad. She looks at him and says something along the lines of, "Thank you, officer. You and the others may go now. This is a private matter. We have this under control." As she turns around, she gets on her radio and all she says is, "We have been compromised." My dad still, to this day, has no clue what happened, who owned the building or the business, and as far as talking about what went down, no one really talked about it after they were asked to leave the premises. Upon further discussion, the lady did identify herself, although my dad can't remember how. Government agency, private security, and it looks like it may have been an old IBM or HP building. Apparently these companies set up a lot of dummy buildings that would house their secrets and tech information that they didn't want to get out to their competitors, the general public. So they would set up offices just like this, and when someone would break in, my guess would be that the dust would be used to track footprints, fingerprints, and probably attach itself the lungs of the burglar so they get cancer and die for trying to steal trade secrets. Okay, maybe no cancer, but you get the idea. When you said a lady in a very nice business suit with a radio walks up, I don't know why, but I pictured in my head a business lady walking up with a boombox on her shoulder. When I was about 10 years old, my family went to the Colorado River with another family. The other family brought their boat for water skiing. One night my dad and our family friend, Jeff, were going to do some nighttime catfishing. I convinced them to take me with them so I didn't have to hang out with all the women. Since this was the mid-80s, my dad and Jeff were getting pretty tipsy while they fished. Around midnight, one of the lines just starts reeling out. The reel is screaming when my dad picks it up and goes to set the hook. Once the hook is set, my dad starts fighting this fish. After about 30-45 minutes, the fish appears to be tiring. Jeff starts maneuvering the boat to help my dad land this fish. This where the story gets weird. Just as my dad gets the fish about 20 feet from the boat, the fish takes off again. It runs the line all the way down to the reel. My dad had anticipated catching large catfish and was using his deep sea gear. We then realize the fish is pulling the boat backwards. Not at a rapid pace, but still backwards. Jeff gives the boat a little more throttle and the fish fights more and we're in a stalemate tug-of-war. Finally we hear Jeff say that the boat is full throttle and fish starts pulling us backward again. After about 5 minutes of this, my dad cut the line and we limped the boat, half rowing and half under motor power, back to camp. To this day, no one believes us. They say my dad and Jeff were just drunk. Here's the thing, I remember this and I was 10. I wasn't drunk. Scared the crap out of me though. To this day, I hate the idea of swimming in the Colorado River. We don't even know if what we hooked was a fish because it never got close enough. TLDR, went night fishing and was dragged by something strong enough to pull a boat backwards. This horrifies me. When I was younger, within the span of 1 week, I partied with the band Dokken and puked on Don Dokken, and then had spaghetti dinner with Ronnie James Dio and his wife. Upvote for Dio, who is not dead, but was instead summoned to an ancient realm to quell a dragon uprising. One day when I was about 5, I was walking around a yearly country fair in town with my mom. We'd been there most of the day and mom was exhausted. As she was dragging me toward the gate, I yell, "Mom, Mom, that's Willie Nelson. I want to see Willie Nelson." She said, "Oh, come on, it's just some skinny guy in a cowboy hat." We're leaving without looking. My grandmother came home. She'd been working the info desk at the fair and called my mom to say, "You'll never guess who came by the booth today. Willie Nelson. It seems he's doing a show around here and he loves fairs, so he decided to come see this one." I was vindicated. What I like about this is how overwhelmingly classy your mib was. I mean, totally suspicious looking. Horrible excuse. Just walking down the beach in bare feet. Zero fricks given. Maximum class achieved. I made it from the border of Mexico to Estes Park, Colorado in a small truck with no money to my name. I did not steal gas or food or in any way break the law. You must be one charming mother sucker. I lost the same baby tooth twice before the normal one grew. Plus I grew an extra bone in my jaw when I was about 30. I still have it because I'm too lazy to get the surgery to get it removed. Doctor says I should be in a book. While my family was fleeing through the war in former Yugoslavia, my sister took it the hardest. She was 16 years old and on the night we left, a small strand of her hair went from being black like the rest of her hair to completely white. She still has it. It's super weird. She's only 31 now and for that reason, has no grey hair. Everything is black except for this one strand of white. When I was a young kid I met Andre the Giant at a convenience store in Waterbury, CT. Nobody believes this for some reason. I was born in 1983. He died in 1993. I was 7 or 8 when we met. WWF is based out of CT. It really isn't that weird at all. Yet nobody will believe me. I'll believe you. My parents taught me the Macarena dance before it became widely popular. They learned it on a cruise. I'm pretty sure it no longer matters if you believe me. Hipster. While on a post-college backpacking trip through Norway, two pretty, seemingly normal 15-year-old local girls came up to me, introduced themselves, and brought me back to one of their places for a threesome. It just kind of happened. I got the distinct impression it was not the first time they had done this. Gonna need you to be a lot more specific about where you were when you met them. When I was about 9 or 10, I just finished playing around in my basement. I decided playtime was over and walked upstairs to go ask my mom for some lunch and saw her taking a nap. My dad and older brother were home, so as I was about to go look for one of them, I noticed something strange. There was a small ball of light in the middle of the living room. I thought it was a reflection of something until I realized it was moving. I stood frozen still, as it was moving slowly in my mother's direction. It wasn't moving particularly fast, maybe an inch every few seconds. It probably took a couple minutes when it was 2 feet away from my mom when I heard a loud bang. Instantly the ball vanished leaving a cloud of smoke and my mom awoke. My dad rushed in from outside and my brother from upstairs and asked what I did. I told them what happened and they brushed it off as something a younger kid would make up, but they could not find anything that would make that kind of noise or why there was smoke in the room and grounded me instead. I know what I saw and still no one believes what happened that day. Ball lightning. Simply because my roommate during my sophomore year in college said it couldn't be done. I stayed awake for 5 days straight or 123 hours, with no drugs of any kind. You have no idea how close to death you were. I carded Bill Murray at a movie theater because of a company policy regarding credit cards. Due to the glare on the box office window, I didn't know it was him. So when I carded him he was like, hey, am I not old enough to see an R-rated movie actually? Most people believe this story because everyone who works in the service industry in Charleston has served him or Colbert, or any one of dozens of famous people who vacationed them. When you said nobody will ever believe, I assumed you meant about Bill Murray. One time, while mowing my lawn, I noticed an extremely odd phenomenon coming from Utah Lake, which I live about 15 or 20 miles from. There was an extremely thin sliver of what looked like water protruding from the surface of the lake and stretching all the way to the sky, like a waterspout. Utah rarely gets tornadoes, so I was completely blown away while staring at this magnificent string of water dance around the lake for a few minutes, until it dissipated. Still don't know exactly what it was, but my guess is that it was just some kind of really low power waterspout. I don't know of anyone else who saw it either. Also, in the 4th grade, a friend of mine opened a fortune cookie he got at lunch and the fortune read eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow you die. He started freaking the frick out. I read the fortune myself and couldn't believe my eyes, but I laughed at him regardless. I hope you know that your friend's fortune is actually a combination of 2 Bible verses, Ecclesiastes 8:15 and Isaiah 22:13. It's been a saying for a couple thousand years, nothing to freak out about. I saw Fabio in Lake Arrowhead, CA coming out of Subway. The amazing part was that when he got into his Viper and sped away, His hair was still blowing in the wind despite his windows being up. These are supposed to be stories that nobody would ever believe. Me and my twin brother, 17 at the time, were walking home from the school bus stop one day. At one point, he tells me to look up at the sky to the right of us. I look up, and there, floating silently, is a black object probably 100 meters upwards. It's just sitting there, emitting a thin wisp of greyish smoke. As far as I know, there isn't any aircraft that can stay still whilst emitting smoke and being completely silent, as there was absolutely no wind blowing at the time. We were both stunned when the clouds started to creep closer to the object. By the time we reached home, both staring at the object the whole way, the clouds had completely surrounded and hidden the object. It seems surreal at the time now. I want to believe. I was in the middle of a group fricking session in college with 3 girls and 3 guys. We were in my bed, and one of the girls accidentally let some poop out on my bed, enough to where it was clearly visible on the sheets and even some on her leg. She tried to play it off like nothing happened, but the other 5 of us all noticed immediately, and quietly put our clothes back on and left the room. I burned the sheets later that night. You fricked the crap out of her. I was in a bad neighborhood in West Baltimore. Think of where they shot The Wire. Late at night going to a party. I stopped for a minute to tie my shoe and heard a clop 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 behind me. It was what looked to be a sea kid riding a horse. I sat there stunned as he rode past me and watched him ride off into the distance. I was in a car chase with someone trying to kill me and my friends. This whole interaction probably lasted no more than 4-6 minutes, but felt like forever. So here's the story. Me and some friends were driving around the suburbs around outhouses doing teenager shenanigans when we pull up to a stoplight at about 3 AM. As we are stopped at this stoplight, I hear my friends talking in the back seat. Friend 1, hey, throw an M&M at that guy's car. Friend 2, no, he looks scary. I think nothing of it, and as I turn from the left lane I hear a little tink and this guy cuts through lanes and turns to start chasing us, and my friends tell me to floor it. So I'm going about 60-65 miles per hour down this main street at 3 AM with no other cars around. Stupid me figures this guy must be a reasonable person, so I try to get next to him to apologize. Big mistake. He is swearing and yelling and reaching for something in his glove compartment. And then it gets worse as he tried to ram my car. So I swerve out of the way and I'm driving in the opposite lane of traffic trying to lose this guy. And then I see it. There is a red light ahead where you can only make a sharp right or left. I figure I've already done enough stupid stuff today and didn't want to risk running a red light. I swerve onto a side street and start driving through streets and alleys barely bigger than my car. I had to maneuver this car through areas either would be impossible considering I was still going 40-45 miles per hour and he was still following us. After a fair bit of maneuvering we lose him and drive around to make sure we lost him. We finally get back to my house and just laugh our asses off that this guy tried to kill us over an M&M. TLDR was in a car chase where I could have died, but escaped unharmed. My cat was on the power lines going from my house to the road, jumped off it, picked off a bird that had just taken off, landed on a tree and came down. Mother. I played guitar with George Harrison in a guitar store on Maui a few days before his death in 2001. I was just another customer at the time and I didn't know who he was. He was buying a guitar for his kid, so we sat down and traded tunes for about 20 minutes. We were both playing mini strats. He ended up purchasing a yellow miniature Fender Strat and walked out. The woman working the cash register pointed to him and said, "Do you know who you were playing guitar with?" I said, "No, why?" She's like, "That's George Harrison of the Beatles." I was freaking mind blown. Now that is an awesome story. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.